Let's bring you updates from the conflict in Sudan now. A wanted Sudanese war crime suspect has confirmed that he and other members of the former government removed in 2019 have escaped from prison amid fighting recently, raising new fears of a fragile ceasefire that has enabled foreigners to flee. Reports emerged earlier this week of a prison break at Koba, where Ahmad Harun was serving a sentence alongside Omar al-Bashir, Sudan's former president. He claimed they had left with the help of prison guards and the armed forces. The 72-hour ceasefire brokered by the United States is already struggling to hold after the army launched renewed air raids against rival paramilitary forces in Khartoum late yesterday. The escape of leading figures from the Omar al-Bashir government, at least one of whom is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Darfur, has raised fears the conflict may take a turn for the worse. Video released by the Al Rumi Medical Center in the Sudanese city of Omdurman shows that what it says was the aftermath of a projectile hitting the building. Director of Public Relations at the medical center, Ahmed Al-Sir, said in a statement that the projectile had pierced the eastern hall and exploded inside the hall. Thankfully, there was no loss of property or lives. According to him, about 13 people were treated internally for injuries and transferred to Al-Naw hospital. Fighting in Sudan has paralyzed hospitals and other essential services and left many people stranded in their homes with dwindling supplies of food and water. The WHO has reported 14 attacks on health facilities and is relocating staff to safety. Still on the conflict in Sudan, evacuees of different nationalities fleeing the military conflict in Sudan arrived in Jeddah this morning on a ferry sent by Saudi Arabia to bring them to safety. Footage shows the ferry sailing in with crowds of people on the deck, followed by the evacuees disembarking and getting onto awaiting buses. Saudi Arabia said the evacuees included 13 Saudi citizens and 1,674 individuals from some 56 countries, including the United States, Germany, UK, Egypt, South Africa, Senegal, India, and Thailand. A military plane carrying approximately 90 people evacuated from Sudan landed at the Marka military airport in Amman on Tuesday. According to Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi, another would follow, carrying another 70 evacuees made up of Jordanians, Europeans, and Arabs. An exodus of embassies and aid workers from Africa's third largest country has raised fears that civilians who remain will be in a greater danger if an alternative to hostilities is not found before a shaky 3-day truce ends on Thursday. The fighting has turned residential areas into battlefields. Airstrikes and artillery have killed at least 459 people, wounded over 4,000, destroyed hospitals and limited food distribution in a nation already reliant on aid for a third of its 46 million people. Foreign countries have airlifted embassy staff out of the country after several attacks on diplomats, including the killing of an Egyptian attaché shot on his way to work.
On this plane we had about 90 people. In the coming plane we have about 70 people. That includes Jordanians and non-Jordanians, Europeans, other Arabs. Our approach is that everybody who needs help, we will provide that help. Also, other countries, European countries, have used Jordan as a base to conduct their own evacuations, and they brought some Jordanian citizens with them. Everybody is cooperating. This is a major humanitarian issue. All of us are working together to make sure that we bring everybody back safe to home. It's a very challenging operation. I mean, we had to move people first on land from Khartoum to Port Sudan, about 800 kilometers, making sure every step of the road that everybody is safe. Then we getting the planes into Port Sudan, again, with a tremendous effort by the Royal Force.
We weren't prepared for this trip, especially that it took us 24 hours to get to Port Sudan. So food was the biggest challenge and exhaustion as well.
Meanwhile, White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre says U.S. President Joe Biden's national security team is continuing to talk to military leaders from both sides of the Sudan conflict to support a durable end to the fighting there. Speaking at a news briefing, she says the United States is working with partners and Sudanese civilian groups to work towards a permanent ceasefire and humanitarian arrangements.
Very closely with regional and other partners as well. The President's senior national security team has been in direct contact with the SAF and RSF leadership. You heard directly from our national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, on this yesterday, to urge the generals, to urge them to end hostilities immediately without preconditions. And we are consulting very closely with regional and other partners as well. And I know many of you have been reporting this, but following the intense negotiation over the past 48 hours, the SAF and the RSF have agreed to implement a nationwide 72-hour ceasefire that started at midnight just last night on April 24th. And during this period, we're going to continue to urge SAF and RSF to fully uphold the ceasefire and to support a durable end to the fighting. The United States is coordinating with regional and international partners and Sudanese civilian stakeholders to assist in the creation of a committee to oversee the negotiation, conclusion, and implementation of a permanent ceasefire of hostilities.
In the meantime, U.S. State Department says the United States is pressing to extend the ceasefire in Sudan, including by coordinating with regional and international partners to assist in forming a committee to oversee negotiations. State Department's deputy spokesperson, Vedant Patel, told reporters the United States wants to help the warring factions identify a path to a sustainable cessation of hostilities through its engagements with Sudan's military and civilian leaders.
The will of the Sudanese people, but following intense diplomatic efforts, the SAF and RSF agreed to implement a nationwide 72-hour ceasefire starting at midnight yesterday to move beyond temporary ceasefire commitments and achieve a more durable end to the fighting. We are coordinating with regional and international partners and Sudanese civilian stakeholders to assist in creation of a committee to oversee the negotiation, conclusion, and implementation of a permanent cessation of hostilities and humanitarian arrangements in Sudan. It's our hope that this ceasefire not just be durable, but it be adhered to and that it be extended. We think that a ceasefire is really important to not just to be representative of the will of the Sudanese people, but for allowing the access of humanitarian aid and for the appropriate next steps to take place for us to get this from a ceasefire to a specific cessation of hostilities between these two generals. I don't have any entity that is taking actions in Sudan that is going to contribute to further destabilization, contribute to further violence. That's something the United States would certainly not welcome. I don't have any assessment to offer on the group's role in Sudan, but what I will say broadly is that, and you've heard me say this before, that on the Wagner Group, when we see them engage in any country, we find that country end up being more vulnerable, more prone to destabilization, more prone to threats. And so we are working collectively with our allies and partners to curb the influence of the Wagner Group, of course on the African continent, but elsewhere as well.
Meanwhile, Britain launched a large-scale evacuation of its citizens from Sudan yesterday, joining other nations racing to get their people out of the North African country after its warring factions agreed to a 72-hour ceasefire. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said the first flight heading to the UK from Cyprus has already left. There will be more flights to evacuate its nationals. His comments come as he visited a crisis centre at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office.
Since the violence in Sudan broke out, we've been working very hard to ensure the safety of both our diplomats and also British nationals. I'm really pleased that over the weekend we were able to safely evacuate our diplomats and their families, and we now have an operation underway to evacuate British nationals. The first flight has already left. There will be more flights this evening and into tomorrow. All of that is only possible because of the hard work of lots of people behind me in the Foreign Office Crisis Centre here in London that brings together people from across government, but also also, of course, our teams, armed forces and others on the ground in Sudan. I'm very grateful to all of them for making this possible. At the same time, we can't guarantee the long-term sustainability of the airfield that we're currently using, so we're also exploring and standing up other alternative routes for safe exit from Sudan. That work is also underway, potentially in Port Sudan as one of those leading options, so we're doing that work in parallel as well. But rest assured, we're in contact with everybody. The airfield is now working, flights are taking off, British nationals have already left, and we will keep getting as many of them as we can on the planes as we go forward.
To other stories now, military jets and helicopters flew in formation over Israel as the country marks its 75th Independence Day. The celebrations for the 75th anniversary of Israel's 1948 independence took place this year, while the country has been mired in weeks of unprecedented nationwide protests, primarily in response to a plan by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's nationalist religious coalition to overhaul the judiciary. Supporters say the goal of the reform is to restore balance to the branches of government, while critics say it damages judicial independence. The celebrations began late on Tuesday during the back-to-back Memorial Day and Independence Day holidays.
Today is especially meaningful to me because 2 years ago we made Aliyah, our family, from America, and we wanted to be a part of the Jewish nation. So this is Israel Independence Day, and Israel is a place where we can thrive and express our true selves.
United States and the Philippines armed forces sank a mock enemy warship just off the southeastern Asian nation's western coast as part of a series of annual joint military drills. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. was also in attendance for the drills, where he was able to inspect one of the HIMARS missile launchers. China has criticized the joint military drills, which come against the backdrop of what the Philippines calls aggressive Chinese actions in the South China Sea. However, military officials from both countries have said that the annual exercises, which were held in different parts of the country, including in northern Luzon Island, which is closest part of the Philippines to Taiwan, were not targeted at any country.
We fired within 12 nautical miles, which puts all of those artillery shells inside Philippine territorial waters. We are exercising inside of our territorial waters and inside of our territorial airspace. And that is our inherent and inviolable right to exercise within our territory. What we can say is that the reason we are doing an exercise at this magnitude is because we are exercising or demonstrating our ability to be interoperable with our U.S. counterpart, which is also our treaty ally. We should be able to demonstrate this at the operational level of war, which means that planning up to execution, we have to prove that we can do this together.
U.S. President Joe Biden and South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol visited the Korean War Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., part of the first state visit by a South Korean leader in 12 years. Yoon's visit marks the 70th anniversary of a partnership that has helped anchor U.S. strategy in Asia and provided a foundation for South Korea's emergence as an economic powerhouse. The memorial commemorates the Korean War, which took place from 1950 to 1953. President Joe Biden, First Lady Jill Biden, South Korean President Yoon and Korean First Lady Kim Kon-hee walked past the circular wall of remembrance, which is inscribed with the names of 36,634 Americans and 7,174 Koreans who died while serving under the U.S. command during the war. And flowers were placed on the Hollywood Walk of Fame star of Harry Belafonte after it was announced that the singer, songwriter and groundbreaking actor died at the age of 96. On Hollywood Boulevard, fans were full of praise for the star who died of congestive heart failure at his home in New York on Tuesday with his wife Pamela by his side. Mr. Belafonte was born in New York City's borough of Manhattan, but spent his early childhood in his family's native Jamaica. He was the first black person allowed to perform in many plush night spots and also had racial breakthroughs in movies at a time when segregation prevailed in much of the United States.
He used his acting career to be a platform to speak to so many individuals, say, hey, we are here, black people, we matter. And his acting, his charisma, who he is as a person, is just shine. So that's who he is to us.
Well, you know, my earliest memories of some of his albums were when I was a kid. And, you know, hearing my parents, you know, like my mom would play a lot of his records. And you would hear some of those live recordings that he put, and, you know, that was back in the vinyl days. But, you know, those are some of those early memories of music, you know. He's been around forever.
He was one of the greatest actors there was. I was a little girl on my father's floor, grandmother's floor, watching. Just one of the greatest actors there ever will be.
He was a TV star, a good one. And I watched him when I was a kid. I'm 67. That means I was around.
And when we returned, a British children's choir rehearsed for King Charles III's coronation. That's in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. For car manufacturers around the world, all eyes were on the Shanghai Auto Show last week, thought to be the biggest event in the world's biggest growth market. Among those competing are all the famous German brands. Let's get more on all those flashy cars. Deutsche Welle's DW's Charles Lars joins me now from Lars Holter joins me now from Berlin. Thank you for being with us today, Lars. How are German automakers doing in China these days?
Well, actually, they're having a tough time and they realize they have to fight for market share. Let's look at some numbers here. German car makers have seen their market share rise in the past 2 years from 2.2 to 4.8%. That is at first glance, of course, a pretty good, strong trend. But 4.8% is also not very much. By the way, we're talking about electric cars here, battery-powered vehicles, because that is really the only segment that's important with an eye on the future. Here's some more numbers to illustrate just that. German automakers' market share in general has risen. We're talking about China here from just under 20 to 25% between 2015 and 2020. And now it has dipped down again back to under 20%. So what does that tell us? It says really clearly that combustion engine cars are on their way out. Electric cars are taking over. And in this particular segment, Germans are not keeping up with their local counterparts here. And that is partially because, according to many analysts in the market, Germans still think of electric cars as a battery-powered version of their gasoline-powered cars. They're basically keeping the same car, they're just switching out the engine. And that is not working in China. Chinese brands, for example, like Link or Neo, they have set up community spaces, cafes and bars, and they're developing a whole new social infrastructure around their cars, creating a new culture for consumers. And that is apparently what Germans and some other European car makers, for example, too, have yet to learn.
And what is the biggest hit at the Shanghai Auto Show this year?
Well, the biggest hit is definitely the Seagull. That's a little car by Chinese maker BYD. And actually, it's not that special when you look at it. It's not very impressive. It's not especially fast. And even its reach is pretty average at 300 to 400 kilometers. But what's really special is the price. The Seagull is set to cost just over $11,000. And that is just half of the next cheapest car on the market. Car analysts in China are betting that the Seagull will become the best-selling best-selling car in China within half a year. And that is exactly what German and other car makers have to understand. To make headway in the Chinese market, and in many other markets around the world, by the way, they have to get away from that mindset of more technology, more advanced features, more gadgets, and instead they have to focus on getting cars out at a cheap price, because that is really what most customers are looking for.
And so, Lars, Tesla has been on the lips of many for many months now because it fits into a particular picture which you talked about earlier. So how does Tesla fit into this picture of the Shanghai show?
Yes, Tesla is doing just that. They are focusing more on prices. The company has recently slashed prices and it's eating into their margins. And it has cost the share price a few points too. But Elon Musk says that he stands behind the decision. He wants to focus on sales growth and not on profit. The idea here is, of course, to gain market share now by offering cars at an attractive price, and then later to use your market strength to bring in a larger profit. And that is a strategy that Tesla is going for here. And looking at much of what's offered in Shanghai, this really seems to be a good strategy.
Lars, thank you for your time today. Let's move on to other stories. If you love to explore new dishes, then you might want to fly to Mexico to meet a Mexican chef who has been awarded the 2023 Best Female Chef in the World for her diversity when it comes to cooking. With her love for Mexican cuisine, Elena Regadas says that the variety of ingredients in the meal is what makes the feeling extra special.
A key ingredient for Chef Elena Regadas' success is her Mexican roots, after being awarded the 2023 Best Female Chef in the World. The world's 50 best restaurants list last week granted the 46-year-old one of the top gastronomic accolades for being one of the key figures in the contemporary Mexican food scene.
Luego, pues a mí me gustaría que
I'd like this award to shed light on this country's large gastronomic culture. Not only the gastronomic culture, but also the large range of ingredients.
Located in the cosmopolitan Roma district, her restaurant draws the attention of both locals and foreign visitors alike. Regadas, who spent her formative years in the Italian restaurant Lucando Lucatelli in London, developed a technique that mixes Mexicanity and sustainability.
Podemos tener en una misma mesa un plato.
Each decision we take when we consume and decide from whom we buy and where we buy the ingredients have a direct impact on the countryside, on our culture and our history.
The award ceremony will be held in June and hosted at the City of Arts and Sciences Complex in Valencia.
On the program, a British children's choir is going through final rehearsals to make sure they're ready for King Charles' coronation next Saturday. The choristers practiced under the tutelage of Master of Choristers Andrew Netzinger. One of the choir boys, 10-year-old Asel, said that he felt special to be a part of the coronation. King Charles III became monarch of the United Kingdom and 14 other realms in the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth, in September, but in May, he will be crowned in a ceremony full of pomp, pageantry, and solemn religious significance. I got carried away there. Well, that's it on the program. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jacqueline Rogers.